But it's Cobra, it's really just like, dude's a superhero. They're able to kind of champion that, I think. And it lends to itself being very wild and exciting and very action-packed.
Hello, and welcome to the Bomb Squad podcast, where today we'll be attempting to claim the 7 million Petros bounty on Osamu Dezaki's 1982 anime classic, Space Adventure Cobra. I'm your host, Ethan Hawker, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Austin Zwiebelman.
I'm Tim M. Sullivan.
And joining us today, we have a very special guest.
Hey, it's Shaybs. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Shaybs. Popular video essayist, Annie-tuber, if that's a title you like to... if that's a title you'd like to impose, and associate producer with Discotech Media, amongst a myriad other things. I'm certain you're a busy guy. And the reason I invited Shaybs in particular was because of his Osamu Dezaki video, discussing particularly the visual techniques and motifs employed by that particular director, which I watched around the same time I was writing my undergraduate thesis on the works of Osamu Dezaki, and I intentionally didn't watch it until I was finished, because I'm going to crib things from this on accident, and I don't want
to. Fair.
Shaybs, feel free to shill. Give us your brand. Tell us a bit about yourself and viewers at home.
Yeah, so my main channel is Caribou-kun. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and don't expect too many videos on there lately, because I'm knee-deep or waist-deep or neck-deep into working on a very big Naruto video where I just talk about things I like. It's just the things that I liked about it. I watched it last year.
Believe it!
Usually I'm more active on my second channel, Shaybs, where every week I'm doing this series called AniTube Digest, where I go over the best and not so best anime YouTube videos to come out every week. So the kind of podcasty, you see my face and things like that, enjoy that. I also do live streams on that channel. I've been going through the entire anime encyclopedia, both versions, but the one from 2001 as well as the revised edition, literally reading the whole thing and sharing my thoughts about it, because it's a little interesting. It's quite interesting.
The sacred Jedi texts. Oh, read them, have you?
Guess they got it wrong. Guess they guessed wrong. And then, for an actual job, because I don't really like doing YouTube for a business, because good Lord, I would not be good at it. I am an associate producer, Well, I work at Media OCD, which mostly works on discs for Discotech Media, as well as Anime Limited. I've done a couple of their UK releases. I think I could say now that I worked on that Evangelion release that they had. I help with various things there. I've done some special features for them. And then other IRL things, but that's all the things that you probably care about.
Yeah, no, a lot of cool stuff. Very much why we figured you'd slot in pretty perfectly here. And of course, we'll scatter links to your channels in the description and everything so people can check out your work, because it's pretty great. But sort of shifting back to the reason for the invitation, Osamu Dezaki, and his film, Space Adventure Cobra, one of many great films from him. Before we dive into the usual questions and thoughts, I would like to just sneak in a quick sort of brief history section on both Cobra and Dezaki. So I'm just going to get straight into that regarding Dezaki, the author Buichi Terasawa, and the film itself. Dezaki, in short, is one of the most significant anime directors of all time, maybe the most, depending on your predilections. He starts a career in the youth of the medium of what is modern anime with Astro Boy, or Tetsuwan Atomu, if you're a stickler, at Osamu Tezuka's Mushi Pro, juggling work as an animator, storyboard artist, and episode director. He makes a name for himself with his first series as series director on Ashita no Joe, one of TV anime's first real masterpieces, and then he gets the hell out of Mushi Productions before it falls to pieces, because Osamu Tezuka was a nice guy who paid well, but did not know how to handle money to save his life. He would go on to co-found Studio Madhouse, one of the big big names for not just anime in general, but like really high quality anime, and developed titles like essential shoujo works like Aim for the Ace, children's works like Adventures of Gamba, and even classic literary adaptations like Treasure Island. And on those, he would develop and refine a lot of his working techniques. He would storyboard a lot of his own work, so it's very much his distinctive visual style, and he always brings a certain cinematic predilection to his work. He's admitted to not watching much anime aside from his own work. He mostly likes live action movies, particularly Bicycle Thieves is one that he mentions in several interviews, like it's one he really fixates. Also Salo, he apparently likes Salo. Good for him. It is a very well shot film. It is an art film, despite being hard to watch. But he kind of pushes it even harder as a, in animation, you can really push things a lot more. And just, again, a brief pause. Check out Shaybs' video if you want to learn more about the specifics of those techniques. Lots of good stuff there. Just sort of, it's one of those things where it makes you appreciate the work a lot more. And, in an audio-visual video essay format, you can get an understanding of it a lot more readily. I also recommend Discotheque Media's release of Lupin III, Bye Bye Lady Liberty, which has a great commentary by Mike Toole, where he goes over a lot of those techniques. And that one's particularly relevant because Bye Bye Lady Liberty doesn't have Akio Sugino, who was a frequent collaborator with Dezaki. So you can see that it's mostly Dezaki's work, like a lot of his signature flourishes. Leading in the 1980s, Dezaki was wrapping up production on Ashita no Joe 2 when he and Sugino, the animation director and character designer for nearly all of his work, Lupin III is an exception, were approached to create a pilot based on Buichi Terasawa's manga Cobra. Terasawa was a former assistant to Osamu Tezuka and had created the Cobra manga in 1978, just as Space Battleship Yamato and Star Wars left a huge impact on Japanese popular culture. Indulging in tropes of pulp and spy fiction, Terasawa's eclectic pick and mix of elements from Star Wars, Flash Gordon, the Derek Flint films, Barbarella, and Lupin III was a considerable success and the perfect groundwork for an animated series that could capitalize on the existing audience of Tokyo Movie Shinsha's Lupin III, while also drawing in a more science fiction-oriented audience. After developing a pilot in 1981 to prove the viability of this potential series, footage of which would be featured in the film's teaser trailers, just a fun fact, Dezaki would develop this feature film and a later television series to premiere in July and November of 1982 respectively, while Terasawa would be much more involved in the production of the series. To his chagrin, the film would be much more tightly controlled by Dezaki for his first foray into the wild and wonderful world of space fantasy. And that spiel now over, let's dive right into the questions.
Yeah, that's right. I'm Cobra. You still looking to take my head?
What were your expectations going into the film, whether it be for the first time or as a revisit? Let's go with Tim to start us off here.
So I hadn't watched this movie before, but I do have like a bit of history with Cobra. A few years back, I watched Space Adventure Cobra, the TV show, on Crunchyroll, and it was during a time when I was trying to get into more of the like classic stuff that they had on Crunchyroll. So I was watching Cobra, I was watching Captain Harlock, I watched Rosa Versailles, Beast King Go Lion, which is the only Voltron thing that I have watched. I think in particular Cobra and Captain Harlock stood out to me because of their protagonists, and like I know that we have like a whole question dedicated to that later, but like I think that Cobra is definitely a show that you come back to because he is just such a charming protagonist to follow, and like he's Han Solo meets James Bond meets Mega Man, which sounds like such a weird combination, but it's great and he sells it so well. And then a few years, maybe 2018, 2019, I watched the 2008 to 2010 stuff, Cobra the animation, which I couldn't tell you a thing that happened in that if you paid me, but it's basically just like, if you like Cobra, you'll love seeing him in this slick, neat, new animation. So, just fun adventures with the Rain Cobra.
What the hell is that?
Expectations on this movie, I would basically understood it to be like, they made the movie before they made the TV version, so I was just kind of expecting it to be sort of along the lines of stuff like the Fist of the North Star movie, or X-1999, or the Escaflowne movie, where it's like a very condensed version of the story that you don't really get too much characterization with, but it's just a treat for the eyes with a much higher animation budget, just very gorgeous cell animation, maybe a little bit more violence and nudity. I went in just kind of expecting a fun ride, and I'll tell you more about that later. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, that's fair. Good to know that you've revisited the television series. That definitely helped your understanding of this film in particular. Austin, what were your thoughts and expectations going into the film?
Well, Ethan, I haven't seen this was my first time visiting Cobra in any capacity. My classic anime intake is almost exclusively limited to what we cover on this podcast. So my head calculus was, this was 2 years before Nausicaa, it's tied to an oncoming TV show, and people love Dezaki. The film hadn't come up in any of my research, before, that this was a landmark moment in anime. So I guessed that it was gonna be the story and the characters that carried this film.
The space pirate Cobra was killed over 2 years ago.
Hey, that was just a rumor. You know how it goes.
Unlike Macross last time, where my eyes were glowing the entire time I was watching it.
Yeah, that's fair. Sort of an earlier take on that sort of thing. I wonder how that shook out, the emphasis on the characters, for sure. And Shaybs, what were your expectations walking into the feature film adaptation, Space Adventure Cobra?
So when I first watched it was in 2019. I double checked on my Kitsu. I watched it at the end of the TV series because I watched the TV series alongside other sci-fi series that were about the same length. I did this kind of watch pattern in order, I have various strategies of watching anime to help me progress and help me complete things. And one of those things is to kind of watch similar shows of similar lengths, kind of bunched together. So you start them all at the same time and end them all at the same time. So I'm pretty sure Cobra was one of those quads, as I called them. I watched 3 other shows together. But I also remember I was actually watching Votoms around this time as well. I remember I watched this at the end after watching the TV series because I prioritized that, and I was thinking the movie would be like a treat. And I was shocked. I kind of was blindsided for some reason that it was an alternate version or alternate telling of a story arc from the show. I think I knew that Crystal Boy was in it, but for some reason I didn't expect it, and how different it was. It's actually substantially different from the story that's in the show. That's spans multiple episodes. So that was surprising, and I don't know. I did very much enjoy it for that.
My only weakness, dying!
Rewatching it for this podcast, I think it's funny. Space Adventure Cobra, this movie, is the first anime film to be released in 4K in the United States, alongside Ashino Joe 2's movie that was in 4K and I think some others. But Cobra was the first one that Discotek had released and that anyone had released in the United States. So it was a really big deal for that. And I was so happy and excited that it was an Osamu Dezaki film. Of all things, it could have been Akira, it could have been any of the Ghibli films, but no, it was this one. I was really happy about that. And so I obviously bought it. And I didn't have a 4K TV at my place. Some mutual friends from college, I kind of brought the film over at some point. And I just wanted to show it to them of how cool it was, how neat the film is in terms of the restoration and 4K and everything like that on their 4K screen. And we just ended up watching the whole movie anyway. They were actually really intrigued. And so that was my second time watching it. It was kind of a delightful surprise. And then I watched it for this podcast for the third time. By now we have a 4K screen or OLED in our house, and that's because my roommates are big video game guys and big tech guys. So we all pitched together, the three of us, to buy this TV. I decided I own it, so why not, right? Rare. And so that was great. And it was fun because having it in the living room, I don't really do it that often. I don't really use their PS5 and do the whole thing. I usually just kind of keep to myself. And so there was some times where they would walk in occasionally and they're like, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's Space Cobra, it's this da.
There is no God in this world.
And I also happened to mention to them, because I just thought it would be interesting, I didn't actually realize this until probably this year, actually. And something you didn't mention about Cobra it was published in Weekly Shonen Jump, you know, like the same manga as the same magazine as Dragon Ball, Fist of the North Star, and it was from like 78 to 80 something, and I had no idea, and it's a Jump manga, and so that automatically kind of gives me the flavor of like, oh, the vibes and the kind of storytelling they're doing and trying to fit in that magazine kind of influences some of the story material and the characters and such. I just, you know, seeing Cobra as like a Jump protagonist, I thought was really interesting. So kind of watching it with that perspective in mind this time around was kind of what I was going into it.
It's just a joke, lady. It's just a...
Speaking of, I'm actually wearing the Uniqlo Weekly Shonen Jump Cobra shirt they did a few years back. Right now, it is very comfortable.
Hell yeah.
And also a good shirt, like most of their shirts. Yeah, no, that's probably a pretty good place to get into it when you already have some level of knowledge about anime. When I first watched this film, my expectations was I didn't know anything. I'd seen Golgo 13, and I think that was the only Dezaki thing I'd seen. I was in high school at the time, and I would just buy anime sort of sight unseen on Blu-ray that I thought looked neat or whatever. Usually anything Discotheque would put out, I would always just get it in their sales, and I would always bring anime over to my tabletop role-playing game club. We would meet at their house on Saturdays, and then afterwards I would force them all to watch anime. It was great. And the first time I watched it, I didn't really know what to get into. It just, like, I don't know, he's wearing red, so it made me think of Flash Gordon. The red jumpsuit made me think of the 1980 film. And so I don't think I really appreciated it for what it was. I thought it was sort of like pretty, even at the time, without the, filmic literacy, but like, kind of hard to parse what is going on. And it wouldn't be until, much later, with the knowledge of Dezaki's whole body of work that I could really appreciate it upon revisiting, even if I still think it has a lot of issues.
He is Professor Topalov, and he represents the spirit and intelligence of my home planet.
It's so sad Steve Jobs died lately.
Who the hell is Steve Jobs?
Ligma balls.
But I was a lot more excited now, especially getting to peek at that 4K restoration. But yeah, moving into the overall thoughts portion. Austin, I'm going to put your feet to the fire on this one. What were your overall thoughts on viewing things that stood out to you and how the whole film holds together?
It's a very stylish film. At the end of the title sequence, when that window closes on the bird for 20 plus seconds, I got the impression of how the presentation would unfold from there on out. There's simulated fisheye, an overlay that represents the main character's vitals, a healing chamber that is like a kaleidoscopic organ. The main character has that charming quality where he's never too serious about what's going on. Like, there's an attack orchestrated on his galaxy's sun that would kill who knows how many people, and instead of calling it like a massacre or a genocide, he cynically compares it to an advertisement. Like, Cobra himself is the best part of this film, probably more because he's the one flat character who's entertaining, more so than the fact that he's exceptionally written in this. I haven't watched the TV show or read the manga. Everybody here is kind of an open book. He's just the most fun open book to read. I thought that it was very funny that the in-universe mechanics of the story allowed for a living, breathing character to have extra lives. The first time I ever saw anything like that was in the 2006 pretty forgotten comedy Beer Fest. But hilariously, that frat boy movie and this anime classic have the thing in common where they both have scenes where the one-up twin tells the main character just like, oh, just think of it like that person you lost is back from the dead. That's effectively what's happening right now.
I'm Landfill's twin brother, Gil. If it wouldn't be too uncomfortable, I was hoping maybe you guys could call me Landfill.
Sure. It would be like we never lost Landfill.
When Jane died, I received her love for you, and now I will love you as my sister did, and you will love me just as you loved her.
The film does a good job of getting Cobra out of 3 romantic relationships and 100 potentially fatal situations over the course of its 99-minute runtime. This is weird, but it did feel like it ran sort of long the first time I watched it, which is confusing. But I know it's trying to imitate old serials like Flash Gordon, and one of the pitfalls of doing that is the stakes always have to go up to 11, so there's not a very satisfying sense of progression sometimes. But like every scene just hitting the fan and Cobra is narrowly escaping. There are points in click adventure games that look like Heidegger compared to this. The movie keeps things brisk enough, and the adventure as a whole takes you to some really imaginative places. I think mostly for people who are interested in old anime, this would still be a good flick to recommend, but for your more casual viewers, I worry that some of the things this is trying to lovingly emulate might be sort of alien and before their time. But I did love it when Sandra told Cobra that he's the only man her army respects and then lifts him up like a small child. 10 out of 10 moment. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, Sandra's delightful. She's a bad guy in the show too. She's the final boss for the story arc, and just a lot of fun. And the point about serials is honestly, the film this reminds me most of is the Crusher Joe film released the next year in '83, which is an adaptation of a series of novels that's sort of very very pulpy, very serialized sort of stuff that doesn't make the translation super neatly over to the film format, despite being similarly very pretty and also having a very impressive sequence at a disco. Shaybs, overall thoughts on the film?
I think in my first viewing, I really liked it. I just don't think I liked it as much as the show, only because I think, like was mentioned, that being a serial, it's kind of, okay, the string of adventures, it starts to get kind of exhausting. I think the film goes absolutely buck wild, like guns blazing for like the first third, and it's nonstop, like completely captivating up through the first character death and the betrayal and everything like that, and the organ playing and everything like that. But then as soon as it gets to the ice planet, I think it just is kind of like, and it coasts a lot. It's still entertaining, but then there's a lot more exposition that happens, and there's that kind of stretch of the film that's kind of a drag, and it doesn't get better on rewatches, I don't think. You can tell that like it's a little boring when the anime, I don't know whose decision, if it was Dezaki's or Sugino's or whatever, to just have Cobra swimming in that fur rug and just doing that while she's explaining things, because there's nothing more interesting to show on screen. It's like, all right, and it gets kind of out there, and I can easily see people like, for example, Ben at the Sage, I hate to call people out, but he did a Space Adventure Cobra review, and obviously he tears the to pieces. Doesn't mention Dezaki almost at all, like one time. Oh god. Anyway, but like of course scenes like that are gonna be kind of a deal breaker for him, but it's kind of a rough patch. But man, like action comes back, Crystal Bowie comes back. For some reason, Discotek translates it as Crystal Bowie, and then the show translates as Crystal Boy. I love Crystal Boy as a title. That's so much funnier to me. And just like when my friends were coming in to watch, when I was watching it a third time, I would show them the bad guy and I'm like, his name's Crystal Boy. And they're like, oh my God. And like, they love that, right? It's pulpy and awesome.
クリスタルボーイの配下が。クリスタルボーイ。そう、クリスタルボーイの得意技だ。こともあろうにギルドの幹部クリスタルボーイ。
And then Bowie's okay, but I don't know. But then he shows up again, and the scene gets instantly better, and then the rest of the movie is pretty good. I think that's my general arc with enjoying the movie, and I think all three times I was kind of like that. Ultimately, I think it's better than the show, actually. I was looking back at some of the events that happened in the show, and I can't remember very many of them, but maybe it's because I've seen this movie 3 times, but I could distinctly remember, like, yeah, they transport their consciousness to the next twin, and he does the other thing. Like the visuals are just more iconic, I guess, in the movie.
For sure, I think Cobra the TV series is one of those things where it works a bit better when you're watching it and sort of stringing you along from episode to episode. It does that very well. I think like it gets you excited. Also, it has the rug ball arc. I love rug ball.
I love the show. I'm saying the arc in the show I don't think is as good as the movie. And then the whole show, like as a whole, I think I prefer the show.
Oh no, for sure. I just like complimenting rug ball because rug ball.
Yeah, I feel you. Rip that sequel that they were gonna do.
But no, yeah, I get what you're saying, and particularly with the pacing in the film where it kind of dips towards the center. But yeah, that is sort of the risk of it. Tim, overall thoughts on the movie?
I mean, I guess I would say like kind of what I was expecting, more or less right on the money. Like I enjoyed it. I kind of agree with their points in that it's probably going to be harder to watch if you're not familiar with the anime or the manga. Having like that kind of preconceived familiarity with the character and the universe definitely helps sell it a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, overall, I since I had that familiarity, I did enjoy it, and I just kind of enjoyed it just as like a retelling of that arc, but a little bit cleaner, a little bit crisper, higher quality animation. Getting to see him fight Crystal Bowie was a lot of fun. Just like seeing him pull the rib out of himself and use it as a weapon. It's just so great. It's just a treat for the eyes, I guess I would say, and like to kind of comment on just like the 4K restoration. So I actually like finally bought a 4K TV and a PS5 with the Blu-ray drive last year, and this was the movie that finally got me to like pop in a 4K Blu-ray. I've been meaning to, but this was the one that got me to do it, and like it looked very, very nice. Animation looked gorgeous. Yeah, overall, I think it's a movie that you're gonna get a better experience out of it with a little more familiarity with the characters in the universe. But if you're going into it blind, you might get some enjoyment out of it, but it's probably gonna wash past you a little bit. But yeah, that's my take. Back to you, Ethan.
No, for sure. I definitely get, like, I feel like maybe if you wanted to, like, you could show a group of people the first episode of Cobra and then this movie, because that sets up a lot of the backstory. Also, the first episode of Cobra is gorgeous. Like, it's really incredible and super fun. So it goes down easy. But yeah, I definitely get that larger point. And again, like what you said about the 4K restoration. Ooh, boy. It looks very good. But my own thoughts on the film overall. I think it's messy. I think it's maybe at times one of Dezaki's weaker like feature efforts comes to mind. I don't know, like I feel like Go 13, maybe I enjoy it less, but it hangs together a bit better, like pacing wise, narratively. But it's a lot of fun. There's a certain sincerity to it. It reminds me of a lot of like Franco-Belgian comics, something like Valerian in particular, in this really sincere way it approaches romance and the particular way it renders its very alien visuals. I would not be too shocked if Koichi Terasawa was reading a lot of Heavy Metal magazine at the time, because that's really what it evokes in me, a lot of Moebius and that particular brand of science fiction. And I think, Dezaki presents it in a way that he's trying to make it as zippy as possible, like make it feel like a nonstop thrill ride. Doesn't quite land at times, but I think the overall package is still a lot of fun, and I was really happy to revisit it. And in brief, next question. Thoughts on Cobra himself. Austin sort of started dipping into this, so I'll let him go last. Tim, what were your thoughts on Cobra?
I would say he's basically your selling point for the whole franchise.
I must say, you're a very clever young man, Cobra.
Catch you later. It's been fun.
For the most part, like, you got a lot of fun stuff, you got a lot of fun characters and adventures, but Cobra is really just the heart and soul of it, and like that's why he's the main character. Because he's the most interesting character. He does have that like cynical charm that Austin was talking about. He's kind of a dick, but he's a dick in a way that you kind of love him for it. Just character design, you gotta love the Psycho Gun, or he's got that Mega Man quality to him, that Metroid quality. If arm is gun, cool. Groovy. That's gonna wrap up my statement. Arm gun cool. Back to you, Ethan.
Exactly. I mean, who as a child didn't get one of those long cardboard tubes and stuff their arm into it and pretend it was a gun?
Dude, I did that as an adult. I work at a warehouse, and I do that with the saran wrapper all the time.
Oh, hell yeah. Exactly. Shaybs, thoughts on the man, the myth, the legend?
You also put in your the outline here is that how is he in terms of animation and drawn and stuff like that. I was reflecting on it, like what makes Cobra different from Dezaki's works in the past, and I think the distinguisher is this is like the first really science, like not even just science fiction, but just like really superhero kind of. He can do whatever he wants, and like he's not human, almost like he's human, but kind of titanium bones type of thing, like he really does not die, and so that allows Sugino and the animators to just like pose the shit out of him and just like have really cool poses and have him run and leap and fly off of things and fall off, like the time where he just kind of leaps off of, I think, one of the ships and just crashes without anything, just lands on the prison and he's like, oh, and it just gets back up. Like shit like that. He's so much more physical than any of Dezaki's other, his other protagonists are are all very physical because they're in sports, or Takarajima is also very active and constantly moving and stuff. But like in Gamba, but it's Cobra. It's really just like dude's a superhero. They're able to kind of champion that, I think, and it lends to itself being very wild and exciting and very action packed. Constantly framing him in a cool way, even just, you know, of course, his mannerisms and everything. Just the first shot of him being the kind of like really hunched over like this with this lighter and things. It's very, the word I'm thinking of is humble, I guess, but he's just more just relaxed and, oh, this is a cool guy. You know, he's not taking himself that seriously, as we've mentioned before. It makes him a whole lot of fun to watch on screen. I agree, he's kind of the main appeal title or character for a reason type of thing.
I definitely agree, particularly in that invincibility. Like, he's invulnerable, but unlike a character like Golgo 13, he's still like very expressive. Like, he still gets the shit knocked out of him every once in a while.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of it, is just seeing him get punched just to kind of pop back up. Austin, thoughts on Cobra?
I just wanted to comment that he's flexing around like a dancer, and that was mostly it. So I guess I'm just gonna do a Hail Mary here. I've been reading online that his character was modeled after the French actor Jean-Paul Belmondo.
You are correct. Buichi Terasawa, on the Space Adventure Cobra Blu-ray Discotek put out, they interview Terasawa, and he says point blank that he was based on Jean-Paul Belmondo. And there are several other corroborating sources. He reminds me, honestly, of another character that Dezaki has worked on that is also based on Jean-Paul Belmondo, Aldine, from the 1969 film 1001 Nights. They're similarly kind of sleazy but well-natured dudes who get in really cool fights
and get the beat out of them.
Yeah, get the beat out of them, but pop right back up. My own thoughts on the character is I like him a lot. Again, like he's eminently charming. He's got that Lupin appeal. Like, the entire like stuff on the prison ship on Cedo is very like Castle Cagliostro almost, when he's running and jumping and leaping, but he almost even more kinetic than that. Just every set piece is really incredible. Yeah, that amount of flexibility in his character, like as great as the stuff with the Psycho Gun, watching him in like hand-to-hand combat and just running around is one of the most like I could just watch that on a loop all day long. And moving on to sort of the big question, the meat and potatoes of this movie, thoughts on the film's visuals. Shaybs, would you like to start us off with this one?
My man. God, the opening. I have to say, like, at least the song isn't that much of a banger. I wish it was more little. It's good. It's very good. But it doesn't like, you know? But man, yeah, it's gorgeous. Especially like when I watched it the third time, you know, I was soaking it in and was like, oh my God, this is incredible. But then I rewatched it because I was showing it some my roommates because they came in. And I realized that it has a lot more significance with what actually happens in the film than I realized. Like, you know, the whole prison thing with her and the little orb, and the two of that really iconic shot of the two halves sliding against each other. It's, you know, they're sharing that consciousness. This just had a lot more than I realized, which was just like, oh yeah, that's so cool. But I'm distracted by how gorgeous it is. Probably my favorite shot. Oh my God, there's too many. But also, like, I would say that like the part of the reason I think that snow section kind of dips a little bit is that he's not going as hard, in my opinion, with it. Like, the animation's going awesome. It's like they're kicking ass. But like, kind of the most distinct and cool thing that he does directorial wise is that shot with her continuing her monologue. She talks so much in that section, but there's that point where she's in the cave and it's reflecting in different places, and there's like the postcard memory or harmonies like in the ice thing, and the mouth's moving, and as it's talking in different, like, that was great. I loved that. And then the rest of it, he wasn't being as flashy in my opinion. But my favorite that especially stuck out with me in this recent viewing was Crystal Boy's defeat and getting split up in half like that. And then because he's in half, he's like resting in this pool of his blood or like the pool of water and stuff. And so there's that shot where it looks like it's his whole face, but it's half and it's on the just the reflection. Like, you gotta be kidding me, dude. Like that's incredible. And some of the transitions too. Oh my God, some of these transitions. It's like, I think my roommate walked in on one of them and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, he does that. It's just whatever. God, it's so cool.
Oh, for sure. The stuff with Crystal Boy at the end. I did make a note too of that cave scene, just because I thought it was so cool. Not just because they do stuff with like reflections and like multiple perspectives, like on the computer monitors, but the fact that they did it with the postcard memories specifically, with those really rendered illustrations from the art department, really blew me away. But yeah, it's hard not to just gush about Dezaki and Tsukino and company's really great work here.
Shichiro Kobayashi backgrounds.
Yeah, the background, the
big
all the
three.
Background art.
Let's go.
Tim, thoughts on the film's visuals?
It adapts like that arc of the show, and I think getting to see it in this like just kind of bigger budget version, you definitely like get a lot more out of the animation in it. It looks very gorgeous. I'm very glad that I got to watch it in 4K.
What you said about the bigger in scope, it reminded me to I didn't even realize it until this third thing. There's a scene where Cobra has his turtle, his spaceship, under a graveyard, and for some reason I forgot that that's also in the show. But in the show, it's just a very typical looking graveyard. It looks nice, but it's just like what you expect for a graveyard. The fucking movie is like this big tower and this giant fucking thing, and they're walking down the steps and they have to paraglide down. It's wild. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, you're right. The entire scope is so elevated from the show.
Like getting to see this in this restoration, like it almost felt like a theatrical experience. Like I'm sure people were able to watch it in the theaters when it like first was released in Japan. Like that had to have been like a really nice visual experience. I kind of like the moments where it gets more ethereal, but the action is also just very fun to watch. The fight with Cobra and Crystal Bowie. I do love just seeing him stab him and then blast the rib through him. Like that's such a big f*** you final smash move. I would definitely recommend watching this in the highest resolution on the biggest screen possible. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, it feels like a big deal movie, and looks the part. And God, yeah, that finale with Crystal Boy is so satisfying. Everybody in this movie dies so cool. Austin, your thoughts on the film's visuals?
One thing, speaking of this film as it had to have been seen as a projection back in the 80s, one thing that helped the perceived 80s-ness of this movie was the presence of certain shots that are essentially there to be light shows. Like, to a lesser extent, like Jane's blood and the high-key lighting on the side of the pillar thing, but to a much greater extent, Turtle's navigating computer when Cobra and Lady Armorite are on their way to Miros. Just shots that would have looked nuts in a room where this is being projected. And I'm not versed enough in animation vocabulary to pick up on anything too clever, so I've got to resort to pointing out some of those like Dezaki things where anime imitates live action. Like when Jane and Cobra are running from her apartment and there's the sort of shaky cam effect, getting the positioning and the easing on those drawings correctly must have been a cool process, because they didn't have motion tracking, I don't think. I know how I do it, I have no idea how they do it. There's heavy use of parallax, depth of field on shots, one weird Westworld-style mosaic effect in the opening credits that was sort of baffling to see in the 4K thing, because you just don't expect it coming. It's a great-looking adventure that utilizes a lot of gimmicks. And it makes the first Gundam movie look terrible by comparison. Back to you, Ethan.
Well, the first Gundam movie was TV anime.
The shade!
Encounters in space. Encounters in space looks a lot better, I swear.
Yeah. I haven't seen. I've heard Yasuhiko loves that movie, so I trust him.
It's great. It's the one that's not just TV animation on a big screen.
Let's go.
But no, your larger points, I definitely 110% get behind. Yeah, the various Dezaki-isms, that like shaky cam stuff, his triple takes. I love the effect when he not only does like the triple take, but he like it's in the same scene, like he repeats the same sequence of animation but layers it over each other. There's something about it. It just like really drives the impact home, which is the intent. He achieves what he's going for. And the lighting effects, like you said, like that's a big Dezaki-ism. The parallax thing. What's wild about the parallax thing is that's like a Dezaki signature, and that came from him on Nobody's, like just sort of necessity being the mother of invention. When he was making Nobody's Boy Remy, they wanted to make it a 3D series, like Anaglyph 3D on TV.
Yeah.
And so he had to do like the parallax scrolling, because that was the best way to do a 3D effect at the time.
The first episode goes way too hard. They did like like 10 sequences of parallaxing. I had one of my patrons mention that like he was watching it with his mom and they got like motion sick.
Early on, it's almost distracting. Yeah, but like it eventually it evens off, and oh boy, it's really good.
I respect the shit out of him for it. Good lord.
Oh yeah, and even after they dropped the 3D and stuff like layering computer monitors and that sort of thing. I don't know why, like computer readouts in front of people. That's always a really neat thing to me. It just makes everything feel a lot more real without more like animation frames. Gosh. In terms of my own thoughts, like there's on Cedo, everything with water looks so good because then he gets to play with reflections. He's absolutely gorgeous. When they're fighting the skeletons, I really love the sequence of Cobra firing his gun. Yeah, the way it flashes and lights up the dark. So good, so good. Oh, the way everyone dies, so good. Again, Jane's death, I really like. That's a very Utena finale kind of death. Sandra's death sucks. Although Snow Gorilla's death sucks. I just want to mention that. I really hate how they're treated in this movie. Probably the one of the weakest parts of it. But
all the women die.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I think one of my roommates, they were like, she's like, Dominic, she's running away and like she gets stabbed, and my roommate's just like, does any of Cobra's girlfriends survive? And I'm like, no.
You can go to the TV series if you want that. But Dominique's death, though, is really cool. Like, it's the way it's framed. Like, it feels powerful. It feels impactful. The way Crystal Boys skewers her.
Despite not being characterized all that well, because her entire screen time, she's just talking. She's talking and expositing the whole time. I'm like, please give us something. And she just keeps talking. But then, that last scene, you actually like run. She's running, and you hope she gets away. And then somehow you're like, no, like when she gets stabbed. I'm like, wait, when did I start caring about this character? How did he do that?
Just now.
That's unreal.
Yeah, like just the way that Cobra sort of like fails to do the thing he's trying to do. Like you can, it allows you to sort of empathize with, again, sort of like a charming character, but a fairly flat one, which is good if your cinematography and your framing and layouts are good enough that it can really elevate the narrative at points in that way. Then you're making a good narrative.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah, you're doing a job with layout. Final thoughts on the film. Who do I want to go first? Who? Tim.
You know what, guys? I'm gonna say it. Movie good.
Damn!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Awesome.
Tanner's not even here, and we still got that. That's so good. All right, if you're in the mood to watch a total horn dog get wrapped up in a galactic romp, this has all the basic ingredients needed to keep you occupied for a while. The presentation is noteworthy for the time that it came out, mostly thanks to its director and a few key people behind the staff, and it's reminiscent to certain materials that inspired Star Wars. If you're a big fan of the medium of animation, the 4K remaster alone makes this a must-see.
Hell yeah. Shaybs, final comments.
As a nod to both Cobra and Crystal Boy, dudes rock.
This is a very dudes rock sort of film. And yeah, I'm glad I could share it with you guys. I love Dezaki. It's no secret. I've written far too much about him. I loved getting to see this in 4K for the first time. It's really gorgeous, and just being able to discuss it you guys was a treat. Getting Shaybs on was incredible. And speaking of Shaybs, do you have anything you'd like to plug or any final stuff on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about all my stuff. There's the 2 channels, I assume, in description or wherever you put that stuff. And on my channel, I did like a month-long Dezaki series where I talked about it, and there's a lot of footage from Cobra, both the TV series and the movie, just giving these, you've talked about it more than once, so I appreciate the call-outs for that. But yeah, I mean, if you're interested in more Dezaki stuff, there's that. If you haven't seen any of his works, I think this is a decent one to start with.
Yeah, just got to repeat it as much as possible, really drill it into the viewer/listener's head. They should check out other people's work. Speaking of viewers like you,
Thank you.
For those of you on YouTube, make sure to leave a comment to boost us in the algorithm or whatever. I don't know. But like the video, subscribe if you like seeing more videos like this. If you would like to see/listen to an uncensored version of this podcast, we have Spotify video where you'll be able to hear all the and be sure to leave a high rating on that, whichever podcatcher you do use, whether it be Spotify video or any other platform. And if you would like to give us money to continue making content like this, if you would like to help feed a hungry Austin who puts in an entire work week for every episode to make it obscenely good, then feel free to give us some cash on the Patreon. If you subscribe to our $10 tier, we'll put your name in the credits. Neato. And next time, be sure to pack your parka, snowshoes, petri dish, and plenty of gasoline as the bomb squad travels to the Mountains of Madness to find out just who goes there with John Carpenter's 1982 SF horror masterpiece, The Thing.
Hosted by me.
Poggers.
Hosted by Tim.
That's right, boys. I'm doing another horror cast.
Oh!
Yo, peace. Thanks for having me.
See you later, Space Cobras.
Farewell.
I just like complimenting Rugball, because Rugball owns.
I just slid my ticket across the table and I said, sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl.